We are the Tribal Youth Ambassadors for Food Sovereignty from the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center.
The overview of our project contains the message about the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center and what we are, the Tribal Youth Ambassadors and who we are and what we do, an overview of our YPAR project, research that we conducted for California Indian traditional foods, our indigenous research methods that we use to collect this research, our different research tools such as surveys, interviews, and our community dinner and discussion, our accomplishments, the videos that we've made for California Indians' viewpoints on traditional foods, the challenges we faced, and a summary of our overall project.
California Indian Museum and Cultural Center is to educate the public about history, culture, and contemporary life of California Indians and to honor their contributes to civilization.
So we conducted our food sovereignty assessment between September 2016 and September 2017. Our goal was to identify healthy food resources and gaps to obtain these resources. Our assessment findings indicated that the transmission of knowledge is a common issue among our community. 65% of community members also attributed health issues in the community to the lack of access to traditional foods.
Tribal Youth Ambassadors has been a program for over 7 years. It serves 10 to 20 youth members. Tribal Youth Ambassadors is a culturally and technology-enriched service learning program for Native American youth ages 9 to 24 in Sonoma County, Lake County, and Mendocino County. Tribal Youth Ambassadors help Native youth thrive by keeping them connected to their cultures. After conducting our CIMCC food sovereignty assessment, our Tribal Youth Ambassadors decided that they wanted to continue food sovereignty work. Starting winter 2017, our Tribal Youth Ambassadors met to begin their Youth Participatory Action Research Project.
Our Tribal Youth Ambassador biographies. Brandon. My name is Brandon Phillip Schmidt, and I'm from Sherwood Valley and Yoqueo Rancheria. I joined the Tribal Youth Ambassadors in 2016 and have participated in multiple projects and have met many Native youth and elders. I like to practice playing basketball, reading books, and spending time with my family. What I think of our food sovereignty project is very informational and important. Due to emphasizing on what traditional foods is important to eat and how valuable it is to Native people. I love learning about the food my ancestors ate and how it benefited every aspect of our lives. Isaac. My name is Isaac Tulong, and I am 17 years old. I am Chumash and was raised on my traditional homelands and currently live in Santa Rosa, California. I joined the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center's Tribal Youth Ambassadors last summer, and I am currently working on a food sovereignty project with my fellow ambassadors. Jaden. My name is Jaden Lim. I'm 17 years old, and I'm Pomo from Northern California. I'm a high school senior and serve as a Tribal Youth Ambassador for the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. I'm skilled in geographic information systems, software, and I'm passionate about using it to track environmental changes and portray cultural information about our landscapes. I am also skilled at business planning and Pomo language documentation. I enjoy teaching and sharing cultural arts like basket weaving and storytelling. I'm published in editorial Combating Native American Stereotypes in 2014 fall edition of Native News from California. I have a passion for music and began working as a DJ at age 11. I play at venues throughout California. In November 2016, I was the student speaker for the National Arts and Humanities Youth Program Award ceremony at the White House.
My name is Malia Espinoza, and I'm Navajo and son in Delfonso Pueblo. I'm 17 years old and have grown up in Northern California, Santa Rosa, California. I'm a high school senior and serve as a Tribal Youth Ambassadors for the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. I'm a graduate of California Indian Museum and Cultural Center's Native Youth Employment Training Program and last year's Summer Media Arts Camp. I am currently working on a food sovereignty research project with my fellow Tribal Youth Ambassadors. As society is revolving, they are taking away our environment and killing it. So I think it is important as youth to preserve what we have around us now to make a difference so that our world isn't dead for the generations to come. Pauline. My name is Pauline Beltran. I am Lake Miwok and South Eastern Pomo from Northern California. I'm 17 years old and I'm a senior in high school. I spend most of my time playing soccer as I play competitively for a club team in high school as well. I'm also involved in various community service clubs where I volunteer, whether it be at food banks or cleaning up parks. I became a tribal youth ambassador with the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center about a year ago, which I enjoy very much. I take pride in the work that we do, and I am very excited about research projects we are currently working on, entailing the importance of food sovereignty. Skylar. My name is Skylar Lim. I'm 12 years old and I am Pomo. I've been a tribal youth ambassador since 2010. I enjoy participating in digital media projects and I am also in 7th grade and enjoy baseball, superheroes, Godzilla, and all things related to Jurassic Park.
Youth Participatory Action Research. California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. Tribal Youth Ambassadors decided to address the gaps in knowledge about traditional foods in the community and continue research about food sovereignty for their local California Indian tribal communities. For research tool methods, we used surveys, one-on-one interviews, and a community dinner and discussion. Our goal was to share with our community members strategies to increase the consumption of traditional foods. Our elders and tribal community members have been mentors throughout the project.
California Indian traditional foods. In our first meeting, we created a Pomo plate and a traditional foods pyramid. On the Pomo plate, we included fruits, grains, protein, and vegetables. And in the traditional foods pyramid, we have the main one being traditional grains, and then it just drops down to traditional nuts and seeds, traditional fruits and berries, traditional sweets and oils, traditional vegetables, roots, cacti, and traditional meats, fish, birds, and eggs. These charts are to help people in our community understand traditional foods.
Pomo Traditional Foods Research. So we conducted a list of all the traditional foods that we found important to share with others. So in our traditional foods list, we included California maiden hair fern, private ownership of oak trees and groves, California bay trees, bull kelp, stalked kelp and winged kelp, sea palm stalks, seaweeds and laver, fields of bulb and seed, pinole, angelica, broad-leveled cattail. Intergenerational learning and decolonizing research. In the far left picture, we see Pauline, Skylar, Malia, Jaden, Louis Trevino, and Vincent Medina. Here we are at a conference in Humboldt learning about different knowledge about traditional foods and how we can better share it with other community members. In the middle top picture, we can see Isaac and Jaden with Lois making acorn crepes. In the far right picture, we can see Luis Trevino and Vincent Medina teaching our youth about traditional foods as they've prepared a traditional feast for the youth, as they talk about the different materials they used and how they processed their food. In the bottom left-hand side picture, we can see Luis Trevino, Vincent Medina, Crystal Wapapa, Brian Yazzie, and other chefs at the Intertribal Friendship House as they have created a large Native American feast for many of our community members in Oakland. In the middle bottom picture, we can see the feast that they prepared. This is an example of one of the plates that one of our youth had made. And then at the bottom right-hand side picture, we can see Crystal Wapapa with our youth making our acorn bites as a effort to integrate traditional foods into everyday lifestyles.
Indigenous research methods. Utilizing indigenous research methods was vital to the project. The foundation of indigenous research lies within the reality of the lived indigenous experience. Indigenous researchers ground their research knowingly in the lives of real persons as individuals and social beings, not on the world of ideas. Wilson,
2008.
Reciprocity is key. There are diverse ways of disseminating knowledge and of ensuring that research reaches the people who have helped make it. two important ways not addressed by scientific research are to do with reporting back to the people and sharing knowledge. Both ways assume a principle of reciprocity and feedback.
DeHu Y. Smith, 2012. Community survey. In order to share the survey with our community, we attended various community events and made the survey available at CIMCC's outreach table. We started sharing the survey on May 6th and ended on September 16th. The survey included demographic questions such as gender, age, tribal affiliation, etc. The survey questions focused on understanding how community members define traditional foods, how traditional foods are valued, and collecting stories on traditional harvesting practices and the incorporation of traditional foods in community members' lives.
Survey. Community responses. 93 surveys were completed by community members. Of those surveys, 78 surveys were completed by Native American community members. 61 surveys were completed by California Indian community members. These survey responses were utilized to assess the food sovereignty needs of our California Indian tribal communities in our Tri-County area. The survey was also used as a recruitment tool so that we could get the opportunity to also interview community members in depth to learn more about food sovereignty and cultural revitalization in our community.
California Indian tribal affiliations reflected in survey results. This is a list of all of the California Indian tribal people that responded to our survey. California Indians: Amaha Mutsun Ohlone, Big Pine Paiute, Cloverdale Rancheria, Round Valley Reservation, Concow, Southeastern Pomo, Dry Creek Rancheria, Hoopa, Karuk, Yurok, Kashaya Pomo, Koi Nation, Manchester Band of Pomo Indians, Middletown Rancheria, Miwok, Robinson Rancheria, Southern Sierra Miwok, Coast Miwok, Yokeo Rancheria, Miwok, Yokut, Wapo. Demographic information. What is your gender? 82% of people that responded to our survey were female, and 16% of them were male. What is your age? 14 of the people who responded to our survey were 55 and older. Those who were 46 and between 55 was 15 responses. 36 through 45 were 8 responses. 26 through 35 were 10 responses. 18 through 25 was 5 responses. And 17 and younger were 9 responses. What zip code do you live in? Sonoma County ranked the highest, as 36 community members responded that they lived in Sonoma County, whereas 6 community members said that they lived in Mendocino County.
Traditional foods questionnaire introduction. The Tribal Youth Ambassadors of California Indian Museum and Cultural Center are currently working on a food sovereignty project that aims to highlight the ways in which we can incorporate California Indian traditional foods in our daily lives. The goals for this project are to create a dialogue and strategies for enhancing food sovereignty and health among traditional communities throughout Mendocino, Sonoma, and Lake County. Please assist the Tribal Youth Ambassadors' efforts in assisting our local community members in connecting to traditional foods. Please support this effort by filling out the following survey. Your answers will help the Tribal Youth Ambassadors develop traditional foods, resources for our local tribal communities. Respondents that complete the survey will be entered in a drawing.
Traditional foods questionnaire. What is your name? What is your gender? What is your age? What is your tribal affiliation? What is your email? Optional if you would like to be entered in the food sovereignty drawing. Winners will be contacted via email if they are selected for prizes. What is your employment status? This information is only to help our youth get to know our community members. What zip code do you live in? What is your definition of traditional foods? What is your definition of non-traditional foods? What do traditional foods mean to you? Why is it important for you to eat traditional foods? How many people do you know in your family that make or eat traditional foods? How do you obtain your traditional foods? Do you harvest your traditional foods? If so, what traditional foods do you harvest? What native traditional foods are available in your grocery store? Is there a traditional food recipe that you would like to share with your tribal community? If so, what is the traditional food recipe? Would you like to be interviewed about traditional foods by the Tribal Youth Ambassadors?
Traditional food questionnaire. Do you harvest your traditional foods? 66% no. 34% yes.
Traditional foods questionnaire. How many people do you know in your family that make or eat traditional foods? 25 people responded to our survey saying 1 to 10 relatives in their family make or eat traditional foods.
Themes and surveys from community responses. Definition of traditional foods, foods eaten by our ancestors. Examples are acorns, salmon, seaweed, and abalone. Importance of traditional foods, keep traditions alive, healthy. Meaning of traditional foods, preserving and connecting to culture, health.
What native foods are available in your grocery store? 8 people responded by saying seaweed was available in their grocery store. Interviews. 6 community members that are knowledgeable about California Indian traditional foods were interviewed. We started interviewing community members after May 6th. Themes in the interviews are traditional foods are foods eaten by our ancestors. Seeking out knowledge about traditional foods is a step that needs to be taken to connect to incorporate traditional foods into our everyday lives. Reciprocity with our environment and community is key. Barriers to access to traditional foods are the time that it takes to harvest and prepare traditional foods. Traditional foods brought in stores are expensive, and access to land to harvest. Traditional foods are important to eat for our well-being.
Interview questions. How would you define traditional foods? How would your community define traditional foods? What foods are traditional to your community? What is your go-to traditional food? How do you prepare your go-to traditional food? How often do you eat traditional foods? Where do you eat your traditional foods? Who prepares or provides the traditional foods? If you prepare the traditional foods you eat, do you harvest it? How can traditional foods be incorporated into our everyday lives? What do you think prevents us from eating traditional foods every day? What food item in grocery stores are equivalent to traditional foods that can be harvested? Why are traditional foods important to have? Did you grow up eating your traditional foods? If so, what traditional foods did you grow up eating? What do those traditional foods mean to you?
How would you say traditional foods vary across regions in California? How do you think we can steward the land in order to keep our traditional foods alive and healthy? What would you like youth and other community members to know about traditional foods? Would you want to publish a traditional food recipe to share with your tribal community? If so, what would it be? Community dinner and discussion. 7 community members that conduct food sovereignty work were invited to our community dinner on September 8th, 2018. 3 community members that completed our survey and were interviewed were present for the dinner. Themes during the community dinner discussion were gathering traditional foods has barriers, including non-native community members exploiting traditional foods resources, losing access to traditional lands. Important for youth to have access to traditional teachings. Sharing culture with your community is vital. What we do is connected to the past and the future.
Community dinner and discussion guide questions. How do you personally incorporate traditional foods in your daily life? How do you introduce traditional foods into your community's diet? What food sovereignty work have you done? Who introduced traditional foods to you? What are your thoughts on the popularity of fry bread in Native communities? What are fry bread competitions and other similar events promoting? What are the main differences between processed and organic foods? Why should we buy local?
What are the health benefits of traditional foods? What are the factors that go into preventing accessibility of traditional foods? What are your earliest memories of traditional foods? A story. How did you obtain knowledge about traditional foods? Do you think it is important for youth to know about traditional foods? What is something you would like to share with Native youth about traditional foods? What needs to change for our community to incorporate traditional foods into their daily routine?
Accomplishments of this project: connecting with community members that are passionate about sharing resources and knowledge about traditional foods with the community, learning more about cultural revitalization efforts in the community, and sharing what we learned with our tribal communities.
California Indians' Viewpoint on traditional foods.
I would define traditional foods as anything indigenous to all of the United States before the arrival of the unsettlers. And specifically in California, they've really only been here about 200 years. So we have a lot of traditional foods in this area, from plant to animal, to over at the coast and the seafood.
I define traditional foods as foods we've always eaten. They're wild. They grow and give freely to us so that we can survive. I look around, they're everywhere we go, and they are strong and they're healthy, and they know what we need, and they've been taking care of us for thousands and thousands of years from the beginning of time.
We have people who go up as a group to go collect pine nuts, and everyone from children to elders are involved. And then people who can't provide for themselves are, of course, brought items back. We have people who go out and hunt for other people.
Traditional foods can be incorporated in everyday life by seeking out people that know how to harvest it, by going to your local farmers market, grocery stores that sell whole organic foods, fruits and vegetables, nuts.
You need to seek out the knowledge, and then you need to do it every day. You are going to eat food every day, so the choice, it's your choice of what you put into your body. At home, we eat traditional food every day. It's our challenge. So whether it's raw seaweed or a little bit of acorn bread that we keep, just have a little bit every day, or it's the greens that literally grow every season in California. There is no spring green season because you can find spring greens all winter long. So, miner's lettuce, ferns, everything you can incorporate some every day, and our bodies are made in a way that they respond to traditional foods, even if it's just a little bit every day. It brings about more health in your body. So you just have to do it. Just even if it's one bite of something that you are familiar with, just to do it every day.
I think the thing that prevents people from eating traditional foods is the time it takes to gather and process and prepare it, the time and the money that it takes to do that. Whereas junk food and processed food, fast food, is a lot quicker and cheaper, and it's prepared for you already.
I think it's a twofold issue. I think a lot of it is financial. I think it's very difficult for people to eat traditionally gathered and even just traditional foods in general. Buying chia seeds at the supermarket is expensive. Buying rabbit is hard to find, and when you do, it's going to be expensive. And I also think with tribes that have become landlocked by cities and development, it's harder for them to access tribal areas to even be able to harvest things that they would traditionally grow, because not everything can be grown in a garden due to their own natural ecosystem.
I think what prevents us from eating traditional foods every day is people don't know where to harvest. Where, when, or even what. And a lot of times we are introduced to traditional foods that are very bare bones, basically made. So what I mean by that is we eat acorn mush that is made by somebody who maybe doesn't know how to do it, and it doesn't taste really good the first time you try it. And then you're like, oh, I hope it doesn't all taste like this, and then you don't eat it because you don't try black oak or tan oak or white oak. You don't even know that that's an option. And I think that a lot of it had to do with shame for the generation ahead of me. You were poor if you had to eat traditional food. And even now, my mother won't eat salmon because when she was young, all they got to eat was salmon. I think we've lost a lot of knowledge of how to prepare traditional food so that it tastes good. And when things don't taste good, kids don't want to eat it. And if kids don't want to try it, they're not going to teach their kids. And it just falls away with every generation. And we also lose harvesting rights. We lose the ability to go onto traditional harvesting areas because now someone owns it. Now it's private property. Or where we could harvest before, those people sold the property. Or they passed away and passed it on to their kids, and their kids don't know you, and you don't get to go on their property anymore. And also we've coming up against the US government, like for harvesting rights on the coast. We're losing our rights to harvest. We're losing our places to harvest. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges of why we don't have native food every day.
Traditional foods are important, and as I go through this journey of learning who I am as a Native person and teaching traditional foods to the youth and to people who are looking, it's kind of like our language. It's just part of who we are. It develops us as human beings, and I believe that our spirits call for it and long for it, and it helps us. It helps our spirit, it helps our mental well-being, it helps our body, because our bodies are designed to eat these foods. And I just think it's a very important part of our life and who we are. And on this journey, I learned that when you pick wild food, our wild food knows way, far ahead of us what it needs to survive. And while the earth is changing so rapidly, and we as human beings change so slowly, that our foods have already made that choice and decision for us. So when we're eating our wild foods, they're filled with strength, nutrition. They have life that can help us sustain our own life. And it's a powerful and wonderful plant that gives so much to us, or animal, because they're out there living. And I have to say plant because it's the plant base that is the strength, because they're taking it from the earth. And the animals, if they're flying, if they're walking, if they're crawling, they take all that nutrition from the plant, and the plant is already absorbing all those great, wonderful nutritious things. As our earth changes, it provides us with a lot of solid nutrition, and it's very rewarding, and I grow very strong. And like I said, when I touch the earth to gather these things, my spirit gets happy. And if I'm emotionally not feeling good, I stop and I look around and say, smile. I am so lucky and blessed to be able to do this. And I always give an offering of prayer and water, but mostly prayer. I was taught when I first started gathering basket roots was never take anything I don't need. Whatever I take, offer a prayer and give thanks. Thank you for sharing your life with me so I may share with others.
With the way the society is today, we would have to have more like classes. It would be, in a sense, to take our youth out and to teach them these laws of reciprocity that we have when it comes to gathering, to respect these living plants and animals and things that our foods. Because that's a key thing to who we are and our laws that we have to respect to be able to gather those things respectfully according to the Creator's law. Say we get a deer, we give a lot of that meat away to people who can't go out and do that anymore, and that's a blessing for us. And that we're told that we'll continue to have good luck gathering those kind of things in hunting. That's part of that rule. And then, if we don't respect it, there's a non-traditional people and non-Indians, they look at like our rules of like, we call it Kela, and that would be the time when a woman has a period. That's a time that the animals and plants they don't want us out there amongst them on the landscape. And we're considered poison. That, like say my wife was Kela, I'm considered being Kela too. I'm considered that way because we're one through marriage. And the land spirits, the land, the animals and plants, they know that, and they are sensitive to that. It's nothing that we're just making fun of it and laughing at it, but we're poison to them, and we don't want to go out there and be poison to them. They don't agree with that, and they'll go away. And that's what we're told, and that's what I've seen throughout my life too.
I think you begin by understanding that balance, like why respect the earth. I think you have to know that if you disrespect it or if you over harvest it, then the resources deplete. So it's really important to have a delicate balance in a relationship with the creation.
And the best thing that we could do for what I'm working on and what I'm doing is I'm bringing stuff closer to my yard, closer to my home. I live on the reservation, and I've been bringing plants back. I have an elderberry bush in my yard. I just brought back a wild rose for rose hips for the summer, and I'm going to plant that in my yard. I have no intention of planting anything that I can't grow. I have wormweed plant that I have in my yard. I have wild strawberries I brought to my yard. The buckeye tree and the tan oak I have brought to my neighborhood and planted them. So for me, because of the not being able to get to our traditional lands like we used to, for me it's to bring it to us or to make good connections with the community. I feel like if we can work with maybe our organizations to make sure that the land is not being toxic and poisoned, that's a plus, because some areas, you have to worry about the toxicity of dump sites and things like that. So maybe working with your local agencies to make sure that the land is good, that's being taken care of.
AB 52 is specifically geared for tribes to protect cultural resources, and food falls as a cultural resource. So anytime somebody is doing a construction project that requires like CEQA oversight, so it requires the environmental departments of the region to come in and make sure they're not disturbing areas, your tribes would automatically be able to pull out AB 52 and say, well, hold on. You're coming in and now you're going to be pulling up the oak trees, or you're going to come up and you're going to damage this part of the river, which is going to make it impossible for us to collect fish or whatever types of food you're trying to protect. And you could legally be allowed to prevent them from doing it, or they would now be forced to, under like a legal ruling, you'd have to work out through the court system to provide you access to those areas so that you could continue collecting and you could continue doing traditional practices that are vital to keeping your culture alive.
I think that our Native community and all communities should try and get back to traditional foods, eating more wild salmon. Seaweed is good for you, nuts and berries, and like I said, unprocessed food, is so much better for your body and your good health, long health, than processed foods, because you don't know who's preparing it, you don't know what's in it, and we don't know the long-term effects of processed foods. But if you eat whole foods, traditional foods, you know where it came from, who prepared it, and that our bodies are more able to digest and absorb the nutrients and the things that we need.
And that we are connected to the food in a way that we aren't connected to other things. Like, we literally are built from it. Our cells replace themselves. They say 7 years, but that's not true. Your bones completely replace themselves in 7 years. That's the slowest thing. But your skin is brand new every 2 days. And your organs are completely replaced every few months with new cells. So if you can build yourself out of things that are nutrient rich and in your environment, you're going to be healthy, and the plants are going to be healthy. These things nourish us on more than just a cellular level also. This is how we connect to our ancestors. Like, you can know for certain that your ancestors were eating acorns. And you can know for certain that that doesn't only connect us to our ancestors, it connects us to humans all over the globe. Because everybody was eating acorns at some point. Even the Europeans were eating acorns at some point. What I really would want them to know is that it's not hard work. Gathering traditional food is not hard work. I really can't think of any traditional food that I gather where I don't look forward to it with joy. Like, it's never a hard time to go to the coast and go hang out all day at the coast and harvest seaweed. It's never a hard thing to go in the autumn and rake up acorns and have all the little kids put them in bags. It's never a challenge. Just know that there's fun, that it's super fun, it's super good for you, and it's worth the challenge, it's worth the effort to build a larger community of people and a community of plants.
I think the most important thing I could teach about traditional foods, it's a part of who we are. And in this world, a lot of people forget that we're a spiritual being, and our spirits are still calling for these foods and these traditional way, like our language, our food, and bringing it back helps heal us.
Challenges. Due to some of our counties being fire impacted, we paused outreach in these areas. We did not have time to interview everyone that indicated that they would like to be interviewed. We prioritized interviewing community members that we identified in our community mapping activity. We were not able to reach our goal of collecting 100 surveys. If we had more time, we could have reached our goal.
The summary. Outreach at community events was effective because we were able to connect with our tribal communities. We found that transmission of knowledge is an issue, but despite this gap, most community members have relatives that possess knowledge about traditional foods. Most people who responded to our surveys were women over the age of 45 who lived in Sonoma County. Our next step could be connecting community members to education about traditional foods.
Thank you. We would like to thank PHI and CDSS for supporting our food sovereignty efforts in our community. We would especially like to thank every community member that shared their thoughts with us in our survey, interviews, and community discussion. With our collective voices, we can together work on food sovereignty in our tribal communities.